So this is the work session for March 21st, 2022 for the City of Minnetrista. First order of business, I will do introductions real quick. We have Don Motzko, our City Clerk, our City Engineer, Allison Fauski, Public Works Superintendent, Gary Peters, City Council President is Kathleen Refkin, Ann McGregor, John Chemperlin, Pam Mortensen. I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the Mayor. I'm also present. And, and then we have other staff. We have David Abel, our Community Development Director, Brian Grimm, Finance Director, Ali Palfus, Director of Administration, and Sarah Sansala, our City Attorney, and then Lieutenant Squire sitting in for Chief Falls. So with that, we have four items on 3 items, 1, 2, 3, 4 items on our agenda. First item is Kevin Nguyen. He is with Hennepin County Assessor's Office. He is going to be talking to us about how the assessments are done, what the process is, and then we can grill him.
All right.
And thank you for coming.
I think I've got most of you. I don't know if I met that thing.
No, but we talked after I moved in because I had questions about my statements. We've spoken on the phone before.
That's how that goes. Okay. Well, I'm Kevin Nguyen. I'm with the Hennepin County Assessor's Office. I've been appraiser with the county since January of 2000. And I've been the Minnetrista appraiser since about 2003. Prior to that, I was a realtor for about 7 years, and then about 7 years of being a fee appraiser before I came to the county. So I've seen lots of stuff over the 34 years or something. And I haven't ever done a PowerPoint before, so this is the first time I'm using one of these buttons. So I will, and it's a short report on the screen. I'm trying to leave time for questions. And like Brian said, I have maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So we'll see how that goes.
I drive a hard bar here.
Okay. This has been the most challenging assessment year that I've ever seen. Far exceeding the run-up and the decrease before and after 2007. We have value changes that none of us have ever been able to imagine before. So I will just get really into this. Just really quickly, anybody that doesn't understand, we use the standard and statutory definitions of market value, what a property would sell for under market conditions, foreclosure sales, houses with new construction, improvements that would create a discrepancy between market growth and improvement growth are excluded from that data. We've got more sales this past year still than we've had in most prior years. Okay, so our valuation date is January 2nd of each year. It's based on sales between October 1st, 2020 and September 30th, 2022. That 12-month window is statutory, so we're all based on the same set of data. We're not trying to look forward, we're looking at that set of data. And as I said, we pull foreclosures and state sales and things like that out of the data. Sales are all trended to January 2nd. The Department of Revenue basically gives us those numbers. Basically, what's the growth trending for various submarkets, and so a sale that occurs at the beginning of January 2021, we would expect when the market's going up 20%, it's going to be 20% higher at the end of 2021. And that's the date that we have to value things at. So all the sales that occur along that timeline are trended per month, 3, 6, 9 months, whatever that happens to be, to get an adjusted value for January 2nd, 2022. And then once we find out where we're at there, then we know how much growth we need to apply to get us up to market value, which is our statutory requirement. Minnesota's 100% market value state. We don't get to trail behind 10 or 15%. Some states have that property needs to be assessed at 50% of their actual market value. And so it's not that, it hasn't been for 100 years.
So just let me recap real quick.
Yep.
I need to understand this. So sales between October 2020 and September 30th, 22. And then you make an adjustment in addition to that between September and December.
Correct.
Okay.
No, between the sale date and January 2nd, 2022. So there might be sales that get 15, if they occurred in October of 2020, might get 15 months of growth applied to that so that it matches the sale date, or matches our assessment date.
I think for clarification, that should obviously be September 30th of 2021.
2021, you are correct. On my first table.
Okay.
Okay. The Department of Revenue uses a 20-month trend to develop what those growth numbers are going to be farther back than our 12-month data set. And just for kind of educational purposes, St. Bonnie has been working on taking phone calls for the past couple weeks. I have a whole bunch of sales that are happening right around now that trending holds to be correct because all the sales that I've seen right now, I'm right on top of them. They're coming in for stuff that happened in January are coming in right at 100%. Stuff that I wouldn't have known about when we were setting these values. I've got examples. There were people who paid $335,000. I'm sorry, it was valued at $335,000 at the beginning of 2021, and in March or April of 2021, they paid $447 for it. You know, we're $100,000 more than it was just valued at, and the number I just put on it. So the growth.
Okay, but that property, let's say it's sold then in March for $447. You didn't then adjust it again, or did you?
Yes, we have to adjust it. We have to.
Okay.
Statewide, we have to do that.
So then you adjusted it again, and what was the value on it?
It would have been, it's valued, that one is valued right now.
Percentage-wise.
Probably a little over $500,000.
So 447 to a little over 500. Okay, so
Because of the growth that you have to apply.
okay.
And again, if that were too much, the sales that I'm seeing coming in now, I would find out that I'm way over those.
Okay, yeah.
Oops. There we go. It's not just here. I don't know if maybe you saw this at
This one we didn't see.
You did see, okay.
Yeah.
It's out that far around the metro area where the growths are in excess of 20%. It's almost universal across this entire area. There are little tiny sub-pockets where there might be some deviation from that, but across the whole far greater than metro area, we're seeing those types of movements. And it's because interest rates are so low, the inventory is virtually non-existent. Houses are selling in days. If they come on the market, they're selling in days for at least what they're looking for. And you've got a slide later that tells that. Minnetrista actually made
Start review.
the top of the list for growth in price per square foot. I think price per square foot change.
I thought Dayton was.
And this is the strip story. That comes from the strip story. Minnetrista has actually got one of the top 10 sales in the whole metro area. $4,350,000 on Marywood. And I've never seen this many $1 million plus sales before. Inventory is at an absolute all-time low. I looked at this last night just to verify some numbers. If you pull up MLS, there are actually 18 active listings. but 10 of those are either to-be-built listings that don't exist or spec houses under construction.
Wow.
And then of the remaining 8, one of them is the Hawks House that's been on the market for 3 years,
Wow.
starting at $11 million. And the other one is the Conroe 92 high-density development parcel south of St. Bonnie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so really there's 6 true resale, previously owned homes. And when they sell, they're selling for 100% of what they're listed. This is a report from MLS that just shows a lot of things. Rolling, how many active listings there are, closed sales, change in median price. The very tail end of this is the growth from about middle of 2020 through today, and that's what the MLS says their median change is doing. So it's everywhere, and a lot of data sources agree with it. The appeal process. Minnetrista used to be a local board city, but
Kevin, hold on just a second. I just want to see. Anybody have questions on that part?
jump in
And we can
throw something at me.
I might have accidentally.
Okay.
I
All
might
right.
have missed the one slide that I wonder if you're trying to, that one there, I think. Was that, did you want to check? I think when we were.
Okay. Yeah, this is in your sales book, or part of this is in your sales book. The 2022 numbers are. Those were your 2021 growth numbers, and the 2022 numbers are that much dramatically higher.
Are these averages then?
These are averages. Yeah.
And-
Yeah, there's going to be areas that are worse and a little bit better
What is our highest increase, do you know?
on a particular property.
Yeah, if there's, I mean, has there been a property that doubled? I mean,
Oh, I'm sure there are. There's like, I don't know an example of that, but particularly likely on some of the lakeshore stuff that has a likely tear down house, where the house is a very small
right.
percentage of the total value, and the land, has to go from say 600,000 to $1.1 million or something in order to catch up to it. But we've got a $25,000 building on it, so the
Yeah.
percentage change is huge.
Yeah, right.
Next
Okay.
door, there might be a property with a $500,000 building on it, and the percentage change, land moved the same amount, but the percentage change is going to be much less.
Okay.
So it depends on the specifics. I didn't actually have to double any land values this year. Historically, back in 2003, 4, or 5, Arts Gravel Point, there was a 3-year period there where I doubled the values every year for 3 years to try to keep up with what the market was doing.
Wow.
So that's how, and they were, I got to be getting behind, but I took that and then I thought, well, I should take care of it. And then I had to do it again, and I had to do it again. So I just have to follow what the market does, and I don't get to say whether people are going to like it. I can't change my adjustment based on whether I think people are going to be happy or not. You almost don't have any industrial values here. There's a little bit on Highway 7.
Nike storage.
The remainder of the Nike storage, once they bulldozed the buildings on it, I switched it to vacant land residential. So that's no longer part of that picture. And I think they're going to be if they can get steel supplies, they're going to start working on that. Probably soon. Any condominiums, any apartments, so those are excluded from this list. And you've only got a couple of duplexes too. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're skipping 2. Okay. So, Minnetrista used to be a local board. It switched to an open book. That has the benefit to the taxpayer of allowing them not to have to call within a certain amount of time. They can call and talk to me all the way up to the May 16th filing deadline for the county board. And it's informal. It's all those are informal. They're not standing up in front of council trying to make a case, or stumble and stutter like I'm tending to do. And most people tend to like that once they're aware of that. But they still have the ability to go to the county board. They don't have to call me. They can just call and make an appointment whenever they feel like it. If I conduct a review, maybe I have to go out and see the property. Maybe I can do it all from my desk if I've spent a property that I've been to recently enough that I'm confident in the data on it. And if that's true, then I'll just do what I call file review and talk to them. If we still are kind of far apart, then maybe I'll schedule time to come out and see it again anyway. But if they get through that adjustment or review process, and I find that something should be changed, I can make that, send out a confirmation letter, and so it's very, very easy and painless and friendly. But it is important that the taxpayer help us get correct information on the property.
When you say it hasn't been viewed recently, do you do every 4 years a quadrant?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years,
It's a
okay.
file process, and we need to look at each property once every 5 years.
Is that by state statute?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
well, the statute is technically that we need to view each property once every 5 years. The Department of Revenue requires that we not just try to do it all in 1 year.
Okay,
So we break it down into fifths.
okay,
It used to be quarters actually.
right.
And so we doing that. If I haven't been to a property in a long time, I'm probably going to be out in the car knocking on the door in non-pandemic world. During the pandemic, we complied with that. The Department of Revenue gave us a little leniency to use enhanced aerials and enhanced drive-by street views, kind of a Google Street View on steroids, and that worked really well. So very high definition, able to zoom in on things. So we'll probably continue doing some of that. It does give us a current view from even miles away. So and if we haven't been through a property, I'll do the best I can. If somebody doesn't want me to come through, I'll do the best I can. But ultimately, if we're coming up with very different conclusions, I really have to. Sometimes I have to go see it, remeasure, find out if there's something that we're missing. And sometimes it actually just helps to see a person face to face and find out, what their concerns are, and help them trust that I'm not just a bureaucrat trying to push buttons and jack up their taxes. The Henry County web page is now currently has public values are already posted. Via the map page, I think, right?
Yeah, no, I think the values are out there as well as the current tax information. It's all out there. Yep.
We just haven't received our notices
I
yet.
haven't received the
I think that's coming this week.
Yeah, they're mailed today.
Today, yep, that's what Jim had said, yeah.
It used to be that they held them off of the public website until April 1st when everybody's mailings had run out. But
Okay.
that's another pandemic change.
So you probably haven't gotten a lot of calls yet.
Starting Wednesday morning.
Yeah, probably. Well, okay.
Yeah, I've been busy with St. Bonnie and helping with independence.
Okay.
So my spring training for Minnetrista is well underway.
All right.
So the tax information should be out. The value information is coming out. One of the things that people sometimes look for is sales information. There's mapping tools on the public website where people can actually see the maps displayed. There's a sample of it. So you can actually go out and see what's happened in your neighborhood. These don't always tell you what may or may not have been like a rejected sale, or some of the circumstances of them. You kind of got to be a little bit careful with context on things sometimes, but it's all there that people can see. At some point, we'll probably end up having building information available on the public website too, like some counties do. We're just not there yet. We tried to start doing some extra kind of outreach and social media type things this year. This report or sheet should be, I think, is actually going to be an inclusion with the value notices, and then it's available on the county website too. But what I was talking about with the growth factor and the trend line is talked about here. And this screen is actually in the new video that just came out as well, saying that if the property sells for $300,000 in January in a 20% appreciation market, that the same house would sell for 10% more and then 20% more by the end of the year. And that's the number that we have to use for these tiny houses we're going to adjust. That's just a screenshot from the video. And Brian will have the link if you want to see it. If you have time and you want to look at it, you can.
Yeah, we'll link it to the website. It's like a 3.5-minute video on if people want to learn more about how Hennepin County came up with that number. Right?
You're welcome to throw this up on your or at your newsletter or however you want to use those tools. It's just becoming more obvious that we need to do more public education.
Yeah,
I can't do it all 1% at a time.
Yeah.
Like it's called to do it.
No, I mean, I think that's good, the more education. Just I have one question, and then I'm going to let all of you ask. So our new home value increase, we always look at that when we're talking about budgets and stuff. Do you have any idea on percentage-wise what that is?
I didn't pull the percentage on it. It's in the sales book. I don't have it with me, but I added it to the sales book. So I didn't add it as a percentage, just as a dollar amount.
And that you don't know what the dollar was it?
Yeah, it's on the front page of in that front memo in the sales book. That's
The last few years, it's been averaging about close to 3% or 3%ish. The new home improvements of the total tax capacity or whatever. So
yeah.
I
know it concerns you guys. It doesn't really concern me too much what that number is.
Because I'm looking at it. Okay, you said the first page? Maybe it's the second page.
Should be on page 3 or page 2.
Page 2. Single. Okay.
Toward the bottom, there should be below the property.
New construction. Now, but new construction, is that just new homes or is that also remodels?
It would be remodels. Yeah.
Okay, so that includes remodels.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a way to break out just brand new houses from that.
Okay.
If it exists, somebody downtown in operations would have to try to.
the vast majority of it's new
Try to
homes
find
or whatever.
Right.
where there's a vacant parcel, and then even then you're still not going to get it all because some of those houses weren't done at the end of the year.
Right.
There's partial construction.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's that. One of the things that people are asking me about is what the tax change is, and is there any forms of relief for that? As I say over and over again, property tax is not like a sales tax. You don't pay double the taxes if the value doubles.
Depends on the levy and depends on what your neighbor's
Right.
properties go for or what valuations they have. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Your property represents your piece of the pie that you're going to be responsible for.
Yeah. The only thing, and this is what we talked about at our league meeting, is because, and this won't necessarily hit us on a city level, but it may on a county, for county taxes, is commercial properties have decreased and residential properties have increased. So the burden is, there's more burden going to be put on the residential properties. So when you look at your property tax, your portion of Hennepin County taxes is probably going to be larger because of that. Here we don't have a lot of commercial property, so on a city basis it's not going to affect us as much. But that we may take a hit on.
You may see a little bit of effect from that.
Right.
The big decrease in commercial downtown, I think, mostly happened last year for 2020 for K21. As that was coming on, there was a lot of appeals and adjustments. There might be more this year. I mean, the report that Jim sent out showed that the commercial was at about 1.2% growth countywide.
Okay.
Or actually some of the cities too. So, but everything else was up, in the 20s.
Right. That's what I'm right.
So that's that shift. It shifts from commercial to industrial, commercial to residential. As an example, my value change at my house in Minneapolis last year was for this year, last year rather. So we're talking about taxable years. Was 3.3%. Only taxes on 7.7%. I think that's largely due to
the commercial and
drop in downtown Minneapolis, and I'm going to feel that worse than people further out. Apartments are doing well, though. Industrial is largely doing well. Most things are still showing large growth, and it's just that kind of Class A office space and some of the entertainment type venues that suffered so much in their income-based values, so they tend to take a bigger hit when there's a downturn of that type.
Yeah. Does the council have any other questions? Or questions?
We've got to move on.
Yeah, we do. You surpassed your 15 minutes. And of course, if you have other questions, you can always call Kevin. So, is your phone number on here somewhere?
Yeah, the phone's at the bottom.
Okay.
People talking to you with questions. Keep in mind that the property tax rebate is available for everybody to look at. Whether there might be some income requirements that apply or don't apply. It's been mentioned, but we won't get into that. And then there's for certain elderly residents who've been in a home a long time. There's a senior citizens property tax deferral that isn't quite as attractive for most people, but it is available.
Okay.
And some people take advantage of it. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll move on to our draft ordinance. Is that David or Sarah? Okay.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, before you tonight is a recreational vehicle ordinance. It's a draft. As you may recall, there's been some recent complaints regarding the operation of recreational vehicles, I guess especially ATVs and snowmobiles on private property. I think the complaints have mainly been people driving them around in a circle or on some type of track on the private property, which has been disturbing to their neighbors. So we have drafted up an ordinance that would kind of take care of this issue. We've already dealt with it in terms of dirt bikes, which are called off-highway motorcycles in the ordinance. So this would expand these regulations to snowmobiles and ATVs, so basically all recreational vehicles. It seems to have worked well with the dirt bikes, so we didn't really change too much with respect to the regulations, but I did work with the police and planning to make sure that we covered what we thought we could actually enforce in terms of the regulations that are in the ordinances. So there's been some minor tweaks to the regulations for the dirt bikes when we expanded it to the recreational vehicles. So that's basically essentially the ordinance, and we're just looking to you to see if you have any comments or questions or changes to that before we would bring it forward for adoption.
Okay. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
Yes.
I read it, and I read it with the people that were here in mind, and having visited them last summer. I felt that it covered everything, so I didn't feel there was anything else that needed to be added.
Kathleen?
I had questions on the limits that are set, like in B, where it says recreational vehicles may be operated for no more than 2 hours per day. How are we getting 2 hours? I mean, because I don't have enough property that this would be an issue, but to me that seems very restrictive, pending what people are using these for on their properties.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I think that was put in place. We had originally 2 continuous hours because that was the people that were riding around in the circles, kind of like that video they showed you. I think we changed that just from an enforceability standpoint. We don't want to sit there for 2 hours.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, member of council, that was really the genesis of that was to enforce it, we got to be able to say how long they've been riding for. So in this manner, we could say, okay, the clock started here, and then we can check back in 2 hours. Of course, that's entirely up to council if they want to change that to 2 hours. It was 2 hours before in just the off-highway motorcycle part of the ordinance, so we were just adopting ATVs and other recreational vehicles under that umbrella of 2 hours.
I question that as well. I think it's a little restrictive.
Yeah, again, I don't have a property big enough, but assuming that you're not continuously riding it in a circle, depending what you're doing, you might want to use it for more than 2 hours. I mean,
any suggestions for language change then? See, I think what Craig is saying, it's hard for them to monitor more than 2 hours. Even 2 hours would be a hard time to monitor.
well, I think if you take out continuous, it makes it even harder to
Right.
monitor because, in theory, you'd have to sit there all day to see if they use it for a total time of 2 hours.
Right.
And the residents that are upset about this, it's the continuous use of it versus just if they were using it on and off all day for a total of 2 hours, it'd probably be less frustrating.
Okay. So I'm not sure how it would be worded. They should be able to use it for, let's say, 3 hours a day. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. As long as it's not continuous. And then we'd have to specify what how big of a break in between. I don't know.
I guess I would say just leave it as the 2 continuous hours or decrease it for,
Okay, so,
Well, yeah.
continuous is what
Yeah.
you're saying. Okay.
I mean, you can use it as long as you're not using it continuously for an hour at a time or 2 hours at a time. You can use it on and off throughout the day, just not continuously for 2 hours.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my concern with that would be, okay, I used it for an hour and I took a 10-minute break and now.
That's what I'm saying, is that then you'd have to spell out how much of a break.
Yeah.
Plus, I know it gets really complicated. The other thing I'm thinking of, and I think, I get what you're saying. If you want to use it, let's say throughout the day, how many people need to ride their ATVs or their snowmobiles for more than 2 hours during the day? I mean, that would be the question.
I know, I've got friends up north that do it for hours. I mean, and they're just, I have one friend that's got 26 acres. So, they use it more than 2 hours a day. Not continuously, but, they use it to do stuff on their property.
Is there some kind of a permit they could get if they want to go beyond the 2 hours? Is that something else to institute?
Might be. I suppose. I guess the question is, how close are they to their neighbors? If you have 40 acres and your neighbor has 40 acres and your house is here and their house is there and you ride around over here, it might not even affect them. So I think the distance to the nearest
and that
house
ties
might...
to the thing where it says this is to be operated on 1 acre or larger. Well, the 500 feet thing, if you only have 1 acre, you basically can't use it. So I was like, well, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That was a question I had and that's been there. I didn't know how we arrived at 1 acre. Obviously, it eliminates the housing developments, and people wouldn't be running back and forth in their front yard anyway. But 1 acre, do we have anything in the city? You either go from the city lots, or you basically go to 3 acres or larger. Agricultural is 10 and so on.
Right.
So I thought the 1 acre was awful small, but
that's a good point.
Well, because it doesn't fit with the 500 feet. You can't have 1 acre and meet the 500 feet requirement.
Because it has to be from both sides. So it's 1,000 feet. When 1 acre isn't, you're not going to have 1,000 feet on 1 acre. So I think that's, and even 3 acres, you're probably not going to have 1,000 feet.
I have 3 acres and I can't envision,
Yeah.
although there's a lot of brush on it, even if it was clean, I can't envision running around when you got your house and your driveway,
Right.
etc. That's why I thought 1 acre was awful small, but I understand it's just a threshold point. But I thought that could be raised possibly.
Sure.
Not that would eliminate
Right.
those that are using this.
Wasn't that the 1 acre, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was when this came up the first time, the property that it was the motorcycles that were caught doing the same thing. It was an acre inside.
I thought they were bigger. It was bigger.
It
Wasn't
was-
that the one on Game Farm or on North Arm? Do you remember? It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
It's
but-
been a while, yeah.
I know what I remember of it is it was written specifically to stop what was happening
Yeah.
on that property. So I think a lot of this was tailored to that.
To that, okay.
Yeah.
But we can raise it. I mean, how many, like you said, how many people would have an acre that would be able to be 500 feet away?
Well, where did the 500 come from in general?
My recollection is, so this is a while back. We actually had a dirt bike come out here and drive around and rev up, and we said, yeah, if it's closer to than that, my gosh, if you're out on your deck in the summer and this is going, rah, rah, I mean, this was like, rah, rah, I mean, it was. I know.
They sound just
Okay. You can eliminate that from the recording. And it was so annoying. And so we were trying to figure out a reasonable distance, and even 500 feet is still, but we thought, well, if it has to be at least 500 feet, and a lot of them can't be, you're correct, then we thought, then that's where the permission from the adjoining property owner would have to come into play. So if the neighbor goes to the adjoining property owner and says, hey, we want to run our dirt bikes around here, it's going to be 300 feet from your house. If we only do it an hour a day, are you okay with that? That's kind of where that came from. So we can go to 3 acres. That's fine. I don't think it's going to make a difference. But that's kind of where that came from. We thought, well, anything more than 500 would be too much, you know.
I thought 500 was too much. I thought that was. I
Just thinking about those people.
No, I thought it should be lower because, I mean, what if, okay, so you ask your neighbor and your neighbor says fine. Then they sell their house and the new neighbor says absolutely not. And you're like, well, I've been able to do this now for the last 10 years. And now there's a new neighbor and you don't get to do it anymore. Like, I don't know. When I looked up, I guess, what a typical acre square footage was, it was 660 by 60, 660 feet by 60. Because I was like, okay, what's a normal acre? And I was like, well, the 500 feet completely rules out someone using this on their own property unless they ask all of their neighbors for permission. And that doesn't seem
But I don't
right.
think you should be running an ATV or anything like that continuously on 1 acre of land.
But this isn't just continuous. This is at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if you just want to use it a little bit, within 500 feet, you have to get your neighbor's permission. I didn't like that.
Okay, the people that came to talk to us, their house is 500 feet or more from that track. So that doesn't solve their problem.
Right.
The only thing that would solve their problem is the time of the 2 hours.
Mhm.
So if they could put up with that, then that would be fine. So it's hard to have a blanket thing across the
Yeah.
board. What are you suggesting?
I would say you limit the continuous. You can use it, but no more for 1 hour continuous, with at least a 2 hour break between these continuous runs, and then move the 1 acre up to 3 acres, and then I don't know. I thought the 500 feet should be less. I was thinking like 250 or 300, just because 500 feet seems. Everyone who wanted to use it would have to ask all their neighbors, and you may just not like your neighbor. You may not be annoying your neighbor, but your neighbor may not like you and just say no.
Well, I would highly recommend before we change the 500 feet that we actually have a dirt bike and or an ATV come out here. I mean, seriously, just so you can hear what it sounds like. And then...
I mean, I know. I grew up in northern Minnesota. I hear them all the time. Like, it's not new. I know they're annoying to a lot of people, but we also are, well, half rural community, so you can't just say no because not everyone likes to hear it. I mean, I don't like hearing snowmobiles, and they're not allowed in our neighborhood, but I still hear them all the time.
Well, we're picking, one of the changes was the time. Mm-hmm. I would have a problem with the 10 o'clock at night. I know the latest sunset in the summer here is 9:05, and I know we have twilight for a long time, but by 10 o'clock at night, you've got people that are wanting peace and quiet. There's people that are gone to bed before 10 o'clock, and they're not all old people like me. So I think that 10 o'clock, if we're going to set times, because it's more specific than 1 hour before sunset, etc., I would like that 10 o'clock cut back to probably 9. I mean, the sun sets at 9:05, the
I
latest.
agree with that too. Plus it gets dark, and I question the 7 a.m.
Well, that's construction work time too,
Yeah.
is 7, so.
So, and I don't know, what's the lawn mowing time in your area?
I don't think we have one.
I don't. 'Cause I was
No,
thinking-
nobody's really up early and doing it for the most part.
Okay.
Most
I
people
was
have a
going to say,
service.
most neighborhoods, it's 8 o'clock, that I know, people that, so 8 o'clock, I just know if people hear these before 7, we probably wouldn't get calls.
So I have a different kind of question. So let's say we make these changes and we do this. Once this gets published, what's it take to change it again?
This,
'cause
what we're doing right now?
right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So if 20 people show up in this auditorium and say they hate what we just did, we can change it again.
We can.
Okay. Well, then
You probably don't want 20 people showing up saying that they hate it. I think it's better if we try and do the best we can. And the other issue is try and make it so that it can actually be enforced. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that the police have enough teeth, so to speak, that they can. And here's the thing. I'm all for property rights and people being able to do what they want on their property, except for when it interferes with the neighboring properties. Then I say, no, we have to jump in and say, here's your limitations, because this, in this one example, as you all know, is seriously interfering with the enjoyment of their own property. And so I'm saying, okay, how can we have that balance? And so that's what we need to look at, is how can we have this balance. I agree with Pam and John. The 10 p.m. is a bit late. And I'm thinking not in the winter, because this isn't probably happening or interfering with them in the winter so much. But in the summer, I tell you what, it would be nice to have people just do this before 9 o'clock p.m. And I understand, Kathleen, it is different up north, but up north, you go out on trails. You go out on ATV trails, and you might have 40 acres and then your neighbors are a mile away or something like that. Little different than when you have 10-acre lots or 5-acre lots right next to each other. It just, so we have to kind of look at all of that. So I would say 9 p.m. would be the latest, and 8 a.m. So, I mean, that's like 12 hours a day that you could do, or 13 hours a day.
And even if someone's working,
Right.
as some people do, I understand, and come home at 6 o'clock or 5:30, have supper, dinner, whatever, and go out, they still have from 7 to 9, if that's what it is. They got 2 continuous hours there. The only two things that are enforceable in here, in my opinion, is time. Just like construction, if someone's pounding away at 6 o'clock, it's visible, it's audio, and it can be enforced. So you got your time that's enforceable, and I would like the acreage probably pushed to 3. I don't know if that eliminates anything, but that's enforceable, because if you go out to some housing
That means
develop-
Kathleen
some housing
can't do
development,
That is so sad.
public safety's going to know this isn't 3 acres, so this isn't proper.
I'm fine with 3.
I would probably go with 3 too.
So 3, the 500 feet. If you want to change it, have some number.
If I'm the only one, then there's 5 of us.
No, but what would you? I mean, what?
You should say what you want.
Yeah,
I would say 250 or 300 feet.
from every property
I
line.
was gonna say
300's a
1,000,
football
so-
field. I mean, for those that can envision what 300 feet is, that's a football field length.
This doesn't say continuously. This says you can't use it there without your. So even if you're using it just nicely, you'd still, in theory, need your neighbor's permission, which seemed a little restrictive to me. I mean, there's the people on Kings Point that have 4-wheelers. They go up and down the road. They're not asking everyone in the townhomes on Kings Point if it's okay to use it.
Right.
I mean, it's even just that simple of a situation. he shouldn't have to ask. He's on the other side of the road, but technically he's within 500 feet of all those homes.
So I'm okay 300. Like Ann asked, can we change it? We could change it if it doesn't work.
How big is the property that they're riding on?
It's 10 acres, but 10 acres can be, it can be 300 feet, it can be 400 feet, it can be, like ours is 10 acres. We have like 350 feet, but it's 1,100 feet long. Now, another 10 acres, what do you have?
10 acres,
How wide is it, do you know?
that I can tell you.
Okay. So some might be wider, they might be,
Even with 10 acres, if they build a track on it and the oval track comes out and it comes right out near the city road, you got a problem. It's got to be right in the middle of that 10 acres.
right. So if you said 3 acres, I mean, let's just say our property, for instance, you'd have to go up and down in the middle.
Yeah. 300 is fine.
Well, let's try
I
300.
don't know how enforceable any of this is going to be,
Well,
especially the 2 continuous hours, but I understand why it's there, because people who actually read the ordinance, understand the law, and are law-abiding, if I can use that term, they will apply it properly. Those that aren't or don't want to, whatever you put in here is not going to make a whole lot of difference probably until they get called a couple of times.
Craig, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, the time part makes it easier if we can go out there and say, okay, they're riding at 9 a.m., we'll come back in 2 hours. That would be enforceable. The 300, 500 feet, I don't think that makes a big difference on our part. We're not going to go out there with a tape measure or a LiDAR and measure that. If it was a continuous issue, maybe we would ask for permission to go on to the folks' property and do some measurements. I would hope it wouldn't come to that. One of the other elements on here is no more than 3 recreational vehicles. That's, of course, enforceable. We can deal with that pretty easily. And then the equipment on the vehicle is pretty enforceable. So where it becomes more difficult probably is between the 3 and 500. There's probably going to be arguments between parties who call us. And I agree with the time thing too. That's very enforceable, obviously, in terms of 9 o'clock and 8 o'clock. That sounds great to us as well from the police department. But in terms of the 3 and 500, that will be a little more difficult to enforce.
Well, it's not difficult to measure, right? I mean,
well, where the difficulty comes in, if you have a suspect, we'll just say that.
Yeah.
We can't just go on their property. We'd have to have a search warrant or consent to go on the property. That's where you could have some difficulties if they say, well, this is 500 feet and come back with a search warrant if you want to come measure it. That's where we would have some difficulties enforcing it.
well, let's just take the one instance that we're looking at. They're pretty much on the property line. I mean, if you stood on the property line of the neighbors and looked at their track, you would be able to say, look, this is not 300 feet. Mm-hmm. Now, you might not be able to tell the difference between 250 and 300 feet, but you could definitely say this is not 300 feet. I mean...
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can see that in the video. It was right next to the fence.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, if it came down to inches or a few feet, but I think there would be some easily, visually, you could say this is not 300 feet.
Yeah, if it was egregious where they're 50 feet or 100 feet,
Right.
yes, we'd be able to definitely enforce in that case.
I'm still a little unclear how you would enforce. So what you're saying is 2 hours total for the day, but how do you do that? Because what if they ride for 15 minutes in the morning and then they come home after work and now they're riding for half an hour and then they stop and then they start again? I mean,
depending how not nice people are, they could literally ride for an hour and 59 minutes. Be like, oh, didn't hit 2 hours. Again, if people want to do that, this isn't going to stop them.
Yeah.
I think to me, if I was riding dirt bikes, that's just there to make a point that, hey, you can enjoy it, but that constant sound, whether they get the mufflers or all the special equipment on it or not, that whine gets irritating for 2 continuous hours. Now, I agree, run for an hour, go in and relax, come back out, run for an hour. I think the average adult, I'll paint myself in a corner here, is not going to violate that. It's the youngsters, especially maybe in the summer or whatever, that are out and running.
Right.
And they can run all day, as we probably know, and don't even keep track of time. Time doesn't count during the summer.
Right.
So I don't know if that's probably next to being unenforceable anyway. It's just a guideline. I'm sure our public safety people aren't going to go out there and park their car and sit there and watch them for 2 hours. They got better things to do.
That's
and I don't think... Good, I'm glad. And I don't think the average neighbor is going to sit there with a watch and be calling.
Yeah, there might
And
be
even
some.
if they did, then it's still a subjective. It's their word versus their word. So to me, again, it's leave it in there, but I think it's just a
I
guideline.
suppose if you get enough complaints from one property, you might go and sit there for a while in order to be able to say enough is enough. You're in violation. If it happens again, you're going to get ticketed. But I can't imagine if, like our neighbors, their kids are out there in the winter. They're on snowmobiles. I love it. I mean, they're outside. They're recreating. Mm-hmm. It's great. I don't care that they're out there, but that's just us, know.
Right.
Now, in the summer, if they were out there for 5 hours on 3 ATVs, I might go over and say, guys, could you But, it depends. It all depends on how close they are and how much you're outside. And so it sounds to me like we're going to say 2 hours. Is it continuous or not?
I think it needs to be continuous. I mean,
Okay.
because 2 hours in a day might, I don't know how often people use it not, just nonstop like that. And I don't think most neighbors have an issue of if you use it 20 minutes here, 20 minutes, a few hours, like you do over 2 hours, but it's not nonstop. Mm-hmm. It's the nonstop that's driving
Right.
people.
Well, let's start with that then, and then if that doesn't work and we continue to have problems and complaints, we'll have to take another look at it. 300 feet, we'll change the 5 to 300 feet, the 1 acre to 3 acres. What else?
The time.
The time
8 a.m.
from 8 a.m. to
9
p.m. Is that? Do you think that's early enough or late enough? That's okay. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. No. Okay.
I mean, it's still light out at night.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just thinking of the people coming home from work that want to go out and run.
Right.
So
Okay.
that gives them 2 continuous hours. 7 to 9.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Anything else? All right. So you guys have that? All right. We'll go with that. See how that works. State aid CIP discussion.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff has provided a couple memos to update the council with the status of the state aid routes, including a map of where they're at, a summary of what the latest PCI is on those streets and what our fund balances are, and then a second memo with some local street improvement estimated costs. So I'll go through the state aid component first. On page 9 of your packet is a map that shows the routes, including the notes with the pavement condition scores and the last projects done on these roads. As you can see from the map, we have just 3 routes left that we haven't done a project on recently. Highland Road, which is still scoring very high because that was a project back in the early 10 years ago.
2012, yeah. Well,
Thank you. That was a good guess, 10 years. So it's still scoring very high, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that as we get these pavement condition scores coming in so that we can keep on top of that. The other 2 paved routes that are included in there are North Arm Drive with a lower PCI of between 53 and 60, and Hunter's Trail with a PCI between 55 and 82. The reason I bring those up is we look at, I know in the second memo we do have an updated estimate for North Arm Drive to do some pavement work through there. And then also looking at Hunter's Trail, the last time we started, we were looking at Hunter's Trail for an improvement project. It would be a mill and overlay, and that was hovering around, I believe it was 1.2 million. 1 million for a mill and overlay, and that would certainly be a lot higher now since we're seeing some higher prices. So on the next page, page 10 of the packet, I've included the fund balance for our state aid fund, for the city's state aid construction fund, to clarify. So we're just over $500,000 currently. We did get our 2022 allocation earlier this year of just over $363,000. And then I included some projections for the council's consideration for the next few years, assuming an equal allocation to what we received this year, what the city received this year, to give you an idea of what that fund balance would look like, knowing that North Arm and Hunter's Trail are 2 roadways that the council could consider taking a look at. Certainly with North Arm Drive, as we've discussed previously, is some of the challenge with North Arm Drive is in order to use state aid construction funds on that road, unless we request a variance, you would have to bring that road into compliance with state aid standards. So there's certainly some cost that goes along with that because these routes are intended to carry higher volumes of traffic and therefore have a certain design speed, and so you have to have hills cut down and so on. I won't bore you with the details, but some considerations to think of when looking at North Arm Drive. And in addition, Hunter's Trail, with that being a newer road, I don't anticipate that there would be any issues with meeting state aid standards for Hunter's Trail, but that would certainly be another roadway to consider.
Okay. North Arm Drive.
Yes.
It is paved now.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it get paved without doing this vertical easement?
Because
That's a
it
great
wasn't
question.
MSA money. Sorry.
So just a high-level explanation on state aid routes. So as the city grows and adds more local roads to your system, you start to generate, we report that every year to the state, and incrementally the city receives eligible mileage that you could dedicate a state aid route. I'm not sure when North Arm became a state aid route, but at some point, the city indicated, well, this would be a good road to include in our state aid. So at that point, they don't say, well, does this route meet our state aid standards in order to put it on your system? You just designate it as a route. And through the years, it generates what they call needs. And so they go and say, all right, is it paved? Does it have curb and gutters, drainage? So there's all kinds of needs that it generates through the years that factors into what the city is receiving for state aid funding. So,
and you can do a variance on that?
You can request a variance for any component of the state aid design standards. That being said, the last time the city took a look at expending some state aid construction funds, Gary, can you please remind me what route that was we were looking at doing the ditch work on?
West Branch.
Thank you.
Sorry. West and North, yeah.
West and North Branch. So I think it was 2 years ago. There was some ditch maintenance that Public Works had identified. And so WSB did a little bit of preliminary work on that and went to state aid and said we would need a variance to do this work because the road doesn't meet state aid standards. The feedback we got from state aid staff at that time was that it would it would be it would be difficult for them to recommend the variance to the state aid board. And the reason being is how much work would they be willing to support cities to use state aid funds for until you bring it up to standards. So, okay, well, a little bit of ditch maintenance or an overlay. Well, if you do an overlay, you've just extended the life of that pavement for 10, 12, 15 years or so. And so their question is, why is it even on your state aid system if you're not using it as it was intended as a state aid route for that higher volume, higher speed of traffic? If that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around the difference in the costs. So if you made the easements, corrections, whatever you need to get the state aid money, how much would that cost versus getting this? I don't know. It's okay to answer. It's okay.
Okay. I don't have an answer for that.
Other than the trade-off. So, because there's a trade-off between how much that's going to cost and how much the funds are actually going to be. And somewhere along the line before this happens, it would be nice to know, considering that anybody who lives there is going to get hit with a pretty heavy duty.
I can tell you, back in the day, I think when Game Farm Road was done back in 2010, I think the project was, as a state aid project, was going to be over $4 million, 4 point something, and we ended up doing it locally for 2.8 or so. I mean, it can be a very big difference with curves here. You got to take out a curve here. You got to design something different there. So it can.
It was the curves. It was the curves that was a huge factor.
Yeah.
And then a lot of retaining walls and things. It was it was huge.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it might be better off to just residents have to pay the money and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, residents would still be residents would still get an assessment even if we use MSA dollars.
Yes.
They're not excluded from.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I have in my head. I mean, I counted the number of people roughly and did a calculation. I thought it would be somewhere between $11,000 and $12,000. And if you could save people $2,000 by having the MSA funds, that's what you'd want to do. But
Sure.
If there's a whole bunch of stuff with the easement, you'll chew that up in no time.
Right.
So it might be better,
Yeah.
you're saying, to just keep the residents paying.
And North Arm is so straight that the curves aren't the issue. It's that hill.
It's the hill.
It's the hill, and that hill is huge. It's huge.
It is, but as Gary and I were talking earlier, I mean, there is a brand new house that's at the top there.
Right.
I don't know what that would do to their driveway and whatever to try to make that easement to but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's really no action, no direction that we're specifically requesting from council. It was just a good point to touch base with the council since we're talking about capital improvement planning, communicate what roadways would be eligible for the work and what your projected fund balance are. We're certainly looking at 2024 or beyond by the time that construction fund balance gets up to a point where it would cover 100% of an anticipated project cost. So however council would like to earmark those funds in the future.
Well,
staff.
I want to clarify something. The $1,120,000 for North Arm, that is not building it to state aid standard.
Correct.
So
That's correct.
I'm going to guess it'd be more like $2 million if it was built. Just a total guess. I don't know, but the other thing I think we need to look at is when we're doing a $3.6 or almost $3.4 million project. This was for Morning View. We might want to. I think we need a financial plan besides a CIP plan. We also need a 5-year financial plan so we know how we're going to be paying for this, because some of this stuff I think we're going to have to bond for it. And so I'd like to see if we have to bond for this, then how many do we put together for a bond? And that might be that North Arm Morning View, I don't know. And then when do we do it? Because maybe a game farm or some other thing comes off of our debt, so it might replace it or some of it. So I'd kind of like to see a 5-year financial plan, how we could plug this in there.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah, because by 2024, I think we're going to be riding the gravel. That's a really bad road. as I was bouncing along tonight coming out
Yeah.
the back way, I said to myself, 2024, you have to be kidding me. I'm going to have to get a Jeep.
But it might be that because we already have, I mean, unless we decide we want to bond for something. But if we bonded for something, I would think we wouldn't want to bond for $1.2 million. I think we'd want to bond for Morning View and this because we can't do Morning View in 2024. That's kind of the proposal here. So that's maybe something we'd have. But we might be able to do Morning View and North Arm if we bond for it and don't do an MSA. However, we also need to look at what other roads are we then going to designate it as MSA because we don't want to lose MSA miles, and that's what would happen. So I'd want to see what other roads can we then make MSA make into MSA roads.
That's a great point, Mayor Whalen, members of council. So the city, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but the city has been accruing mileage that you would be able to designate a new route. The challenge with Minnetrista, and Superintendent Peters and I have talked about this a few times, is with all the county roads that come through Minnetrista and the requirements for designating a state aid route, we're a little bit challenged at this point to see what would be a logical next route for Minnetrista. So as an example, essentially the challenge in Minnetrista is that a state aid route has to either connect to, on both ends, to another state aid route or a county road or highway. And so when we start narrowing that down and then we start looking at, well, what are some of the volumes of these roads? They're gravel, and would we designate a route that would be similar to North Arm where you designate it as a state aid route, but in reality it would take a reconstruction in order to use those construction funds on that route. So we can certainly take a look at that as a deeper dive, and I can follow up with the council at another time as far as where our the available miles to designate are and what we could look at for roads. But
because it would also eliminate Apple Garden. So if we eliminate North Arm as our MSA road, it also eliminates Apple Garden. So we have to look at that too.
Yeah, and we don't have to. The city doesn't have to go and revoke that mileage if you don't. If there's another road that you want to designate as a state aid road, you don't have to revoke that mileage unless you have a large road or a long road that you want to designate as a state aid route and use construction funds on. I think the challenge for Minnetrista is just identifying what's your next state aid route to spend that money on.
Right. Okay.
And I have one more question. Is it okay to ask if have there been any residents request the road be done?
I've had an email from a resident on North Arm.
That wanted it done or didn't want it done?
No, did want it done.
Okay, and was there anybody who didn't want it done?
I haven't heard anybody that doesn't want it done.
Yeah,
Gary.
I've heard plenty on it. Every time we're out patching, we have calls, what are you wasting money for? But we have to patch it, just at least make it passable. So,
So the people who are asking you that question actually want it done, right? Yeah. Okay.
And also FYI, so when we did Halstead, again, that was gravel to bituminous, so a little bit different, but those were $14,000 assessments?
On Game Farm, it was.
Not Game Farm,
sorry.
Halstead.
It's 12 to 14.
Halstead was,
I think it was
14 and 11, basically 50, Yep.
14,000, and then I think Game Farm was 12.
Game Farm ended up, about 11, 12, yep.
Yeah, so, and again, those were gravel to bituminous. That might be a little different going bituminous to better bituminous. We have to look at that, but.
Good to know.
Yeah. All right, so
that's where we're at with state aid. If there aren't any other questions about the state aid component, we can move on to the local capital improvement plan updates that were provided. Starting on page 11 of the packet, the budget presented for 2023 for the Turtle Creek neighborhood is the same as what we were looking at previously. However, as we move into 2024 and adding in Morning View and looking at North Arm, so the challenge right where we're at right now with construction is we are seeing not only bituminous costs, the cost for the actual street, but all material costs are going up. Pipe is going up, concrete's going up, and also the other components to make your road, like the sand, the gravel, because gas prices are going up, those costs are going up. So Morning View is coming up with both surface and drainage improvements at just under $3.7 million. The last time we took a look at Morning View, we were just looking at the roadway only, so it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. But we're looking at current pricing in the industry to get that $3.67 million estimate. Also included in that price is curb and gutter, because we are hearing from residents in these, Minneapolis Avenue is a great example, that they want curb and gutter. And so that's running around $350,000. So that's all included for a budget consideration. Hopefully pricing will go down, but we're not hearing in the next 12 to 24 months that it would be going down. So we want to present a realistic number to the council for consideration. We don't want to be overly optimistic on pricing going down, because the indicators are that it'll stay up. So that 2024 year, as Mayor Whalen mentioned, would be looking at a bonding year if council was still interested in looking at that Morning View area for a reconstruction.
And that's why I was saying we might, if we do North Arm and don't do it as MSA, and I think we should still look at the numbers, some kind of high-level numbers in terms of what it would cost if we did it MSA. But if we didn't, then that would be a really good time to do a bond for both those projects at the same time.
We can bond for MSA roads, though, can't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for instance, if the MSA was, let's say to do North Arm, MSA was $3 million, we can bond for it even if we only have $1 million from MSA. Mm-hmm. That's typically what we did that on Halsted, and that was done in Highland. No, we didn't bond. You did.
Yep,
yeah, you bonded
both
for Highland.
Highland
yeah.
and Halsted.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can bond for the balance. You can even, if you use MSA dollars, you can even use part of your MSA fund to pay the bond for that project. We didn't on Halsted, but they did on Highland.
We did. Yeah, we're allocating.
Mm-hmm. But keep in mind, then that also reduces your MSA dollars every year. So I think for another, so just kind of looking back real quick, next year it looks like almost $1 million. So when we do our budget, we're probably going to have to consider that. And then moving forward, just because of all the needs that we have, we may have to add $100,000 every year. I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to stop at $1 million, just when you look at all the roads that we're doing. But the other thing is, so let's look at a 5-year CIP, a financial plan. Let's look at the North Arm Drive anticipated cost for if it's MSA versus non-MSA, so we have at least some comparisons. What else? And bonding. Let's just, what would it cost? And again, that's a year out, so we can't really know then.
Yeah, I could have like Todd Hagen and Ellers run something now, or maybe try to guesstimate. We know the rates are probably going to go up. They're talking about 6 more rate increases for the Fed level or reserve. But so you could guess what's current rates and add another 1.5%, or I don't know. I guess you can try to project.
Right.
But
something maybe that would give us some idea.
Scenario.
Yeah. And what that payment would look like, so we kind of know.
You may consider still bonding, let's just, for what was here for 2024 projected, and bonding on Morningside and North Arm, and keep the $1 million that we would levy for all the other projects we have to do.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I think you continue levying. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we'll also want to take a look at some overlays too. We've got Hunter's Crest identified for the next 3 years after that, and we'll be keeping an eye on some of those pavement condition scores as we see other roads starting to age too. Keeping an eye on that budget too, to get some overlays done as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But even like the game farm roads and stuff that have been done too, we got to start looking at that.
Game farm is another one,
that's
yeah.
going to be coming due. You're pushing that to the point now where it's going to be a mill and overlay to keep the pavement ratings up. So I mean, there's a lot of other factors that not just the roads that are in need, but the roads that we've done in the past to keep them going. We're going to have to start incorporating into the plans. So
Vicious cycle.
I know.
it is a very vicious cycle.
Plus, we didn't do game farm, that little stretch of game farm. We were going to do that, and we didn't because we didn't have the money. So I don't know if we want to think about doing that next year or not. So maybe we should look at that Turtle Creek area. Obviously, we've done that. But what if we added in game farm? What would we need for that in terms of budget for next year? I don't know.
We can come back with the estimated cost. I hesitate to take a look at the capital improvement plan that we had put in place with the pavement condition scores last year because the numbers just, I don't want to give you incorrect numbers.
Okay.
So I'll have a note here to come back with game farm.
I have one other question. Beside doing the 5-year financial plan, the North Arm, compared non-MSA to MSA, is it important right now for us to have an idea how many residents are on those roads, what the assessment dollars would look like?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Right.
It's the high level.
And that's why I was saying before when we did the assessment for the school, we can't always stick to that 50% because it gets too high. And so we'll have to look at that. I was talking to Allison, and she said that there's a value. What is it called that you can kind of assess the value versus the assessment to make sure that we're not too high?
Yeah, there's a
study or something.
Gosh, it's a valuation report.
Okay,
and there's a professional in the real estate industry will go and take a look at the properties that are proposed to be assessed with a project, and they'll take a look at what the current market value is right now. They'll take a look at other project examples in other cities, comparable cities, to determine what the estimated increase in value would be of that property after the street improvement project, utility, whatever the scope of your project is. And so that can provide council some an idea of what that maximum assessment amount could be supported by.
Is that something to think about? We don't have to decide on that tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the Jean Lanier Park discussion. Can we move that to the regular meeting?
Sure.
Because we have about 10 minutes before a regular meeting, 13 to be exact, so I want to be sure we have a little bit of a break. Can we do that?
Yes.
All right. So we will move that to our regular meeting. When we get to the regular meeting, remind me to add that. So, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ann. Kathleen made that motion and seconded. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, and we have 13 minutes.